but we're talking about the most brilliant mind this world has ever seen.
Welcome back into episode 7 of the Brian and Brenden talking about Beaver football podcast. It's a historic episode of the podcast, and I'll get to that moment in just a second. But it is a Wednesday evening here in Corvallis on what appears to be the last nice day before the rain and the rain and the rain and the rain keeps coming. But I'll get to why this is an important podcast, Brenden. This is the first time in the 2 years of us doing podcasting together that we get to talk about an Oregon State victory in a Pac-12 game.
Wow. That's equally exciting as it is depressing, Brian.
It is.
I hate to be that pessimistic, but it is equally as exciting as depressing.
Yeah, no, it really is. That's a great way to put it. I mean, Oregon State, they were 0-9 last year in conference?
There was a chance. There were two chances. There was a chance against Colorado, and there was a chance against Oregon. Just couldn't quite cut it together. But I mean, hey, Oregon State had 2 wins last year, Brian, 2 wins total, and I didn't know if Oregon State would get to win 2 this year. So that provides me a little bit of optimism for sure.
Yeah, after that Colorado game, it looked pretty bleak.
And again, credit to Colorado. Maybe Colorado's better than I think. And man, they not to take us off topic, but man, they improved real quick.
Yeah, no, I don't even know how to handle this podcast. It's going to be a whole different energy level, a whole different. We're going into uncharted territories in terms of what this podcast is going to be, because we've just talked about
loss after loss after loss.
Exactly. So anyway, of course, Oregon State in a thrilling overtime victory of 47-44 over Cal, which was surprising. Looking over last week's predictions, you and I both had them losing. You had them losing closely. I had them as a blowout. I had no idea that Davis, the defense would just completely eliminate their passing game. Treston Deku held Chad Hansen hostage on Deku Island. It was a stunning game on so many levels, and it was just awesome to watch. I mean, we haven't even touched about Ryan Nall and Daryl Garrettson's bounce back game. It was just a great game all around.
Funny thing was I do very well recall another Oregon State corner got nicknamed an island as well. I remember Nelson Island after Steven Nelson back in I guess that was 13 and 14 for Steven Nelson because he was a JC transfer cornerback. I guess Oregon State's had a couple back-to-back JC cornerbacks. They've done pretty well for him. Might not be a bad route for the Beavers to continue to go. And even Gary Anderson's like, man, if we had Treston one more year, man, he's undoubtedly, I think he'll be, not to speculate, I think he'll be a top 10 corner, probably taking the draft this year. He's got size, speed, quickness. He can definitely play corner at the next level. And I think he'd be a great addition. You look at Steven Nelson already making an impact for the Kansas City Chiefs, even starting on some packages. Oregon State the last couple of years put some defensive backs. Poyer's finally starting for the Browns. Granted, it's the Browns, but still starting in the NFL. And then obviously Brandon Hughes had a long career. Keenan Lewis was in the pros for a while. Oregon State's definitely sent some defensive backs in the pros, and it's looking like Treston Deku might just fall right in line with that, Brian.
Yeah, no, that is very true. So, I mean, we'll just keep, since the game happened last week, we'll keep, things, pretty short.
Especially with how much coverage OMN provided the night of the game.
That is true. So, Brenden, I guess my first question to you about this, Oregon State coming into the Cal game, kind of, debriefing a little bit about the Cal game. What does this win against Cal mean for Oregon State moving forward?
No person wanted to know that answer more than me because actually, Brian, if you recall, I was one of the first people to ask Coach Anderson a question in that press conference, and I asked, because Coach Anderson last year, as the losses piled up, he said, we need that program-defining moment. He said moment, not win, because he probably knew they weren't going to win a game when the year went along. And he goes, sometimes it can be a loss, but I'd really prefer it to be a win. So I asked him, I said, is this one of those program-defining wins? And, he said, I wouldn't say it's program-defining, but it is game-changing. And I think getting a win in conference, it opens up so many more possibilities. Once you've proven you can beat somebody in your league, And by any stretch of the imagination, Cal is not the worst team in this league. That I can think of 2-3 others that are worse than Cal in this league. Maybe not defensively, but overall, I know Arizona's struggling this year quite a bit, much more than Cal, and Oregon arguably is worse than Cal. There's not very many elite defenses in the Pac-12, and if Oregon State can find that offense that they found against Cal consistently, it'll give them a chance to win. That's the offense. Maybe not quite as balanced, but that's the offensive potential that we've been saying they could have for this year was a dynamic running game with Ryan Nall and Artavis Pierce and Seth Collins even back there a little bit, Paul Lucas. The dynamic running game. They still have not found a passing game, which really scares me going up into this next weekend against Utah. We'll talk about that later because, Utah, after a game like this, they're going to load the box and try to stop the run. And Brian, we'll talk about this a little later. It might be near impossible to throw the football this weekend.
that is very true. Yeah, the biggest thing I took away from this win was just that finally Oregon State, you saw they had a game plan. They talked about it. Like we're gonna run the ball. That's what Anderson said on Thursday, leading up to the game. We're gonna run the ball. We're gonna try to control the clock. And they did that. They executed their game plan from start to finish. Now, the defense, did some things, and Cal, of course, came back, storming back late, scoring 17 points in the fourth quarter. But even when that happened, when I was on the field and Cal's they converted 2 huge fourth downs. One on the Muhammad's, 50-yard touchdown, and then there's that pass in the middle. I forgot who caught it, but that they bent, but they didn't break. Basically, that old cliche. That could have been a huge swing momentumly going into overtime, but they buckled down. They held Cal to a field goal, which was huge, and then found a way on a play that looked like it was going to be a disaster. They found a way to score and win the game. And so I just thought that just finally they had a game where they had a game plan and they executed it.
Right.
And when things looked like they were about to fall apart, they tightened it back up and were able to come out on top. So that's probably the most important thing for me, is that they finally were able to get a win, a good win. But they haven't had one of those really, like, dating back to last year. I mean, Weber State wasn't an impressive win. San Jose State wasn't an impressive win. Idaho State, they didn't play great.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say Weber State. I'd say for where the program was, San Jose State at the time wasn't impressive, but it was like, oh, okay.
But they didn't play well.
I thought the defense played well. I thought coming off that Michigan blowout, and for how under talented and how lack of depth and the whole thing. It's interesting. I thought that San Jose State game and the next week's game against Stanford were the two best games Seth Collins played at quarterback in his career, in my opinion. So at the time, and then they went and competed with Stanford the next week. Obviously, we're getting deep into last year and we competed deep. I thought those were the 2 best games Oregon State may have played prior to the Civil War last year, because they were competitive. And then after that, obviously, injuries mounted, the wheels fell off, so on and so forth. But you're true. This is the best win of the Gary Anderson era, and it's not even close.
Yeah, well, I'll rephrase that. I didn't leave those games thinking, you know what, this is a good team.
Did you leave Reeser this weekend saying it's a good team? I'm not sure. I'm not quite there.
I'm not saying they're a good team, but especially in those Weber State and San Jose State games, even though they were won and they had a winning record, after that's they're still
the only time I ever felt that
I didn't feel like they played a good game.
No, the only time I felt that way was I'm gonna throw San Jose State out because I didn't feel too bad after that game. I felt bad after the Weber State game, well, particularly after Idaho State, because I said, man, all the miscues they had, if that was a decent FCS team, i.e. a North Dakota State, Eastern Washington, Beavers probably would have lost that game. They did not come out well after that bye week and after playing Minnesota. And arguably, this was the best. I'm going to say this was the most complete game Oregon State put together in the Gary Anderson era, and it showed because they got a win.
And I agree with that. So does this change how many wins they have this year?
Slightly. Only because, I think now, we talked, Brian, before the season, we were saying, hey, this team probably is going to win somewhere between, 3, 4, 5 games, somewhere in there. I said they're still a year away from going bowling. I still didn't think they were going to get to that 6. I think their biggest leap under Coach Anderson is going to be not this year, but next year. I think he's ahead of the rebuild schedule, and it usually takes about 3 to 4 years to rebuild. You're seeing Mike McIntyre doing it in his fourth year. You're seeing Sonny Dykes had success in his second and kind of third year. If Oregon State can continue to get the recruits they're getting a lot of JC. We can talk about it a little bit. They got a couple big JC commitments over the weekends that we saw. They can continue to get the recruits that they're going to get. I think they could make that jump to even a 7-ish win, maybe even a little bit more than that next year. This year, though, I'm still locked in. I think the Beavers win 3 or 4 games. I'm looking at the schedule. I think Oregon is a very winnable game. I think Arizona is a very winnable game. Both those games are at home. I think both those games the Beavers could win. I think they may, if they play well, they may be favored against Arizona, even if Arizona continues to go on the path they are. Civil War, they got a chance. Outside of that, they got UCLA, Stanford, Washington State, and Utah in there as well. I don't think I'm missing anybody there. Brian, am I missing anyone else?
UCLA?
Yeah, UCLA, Stanford, Washington State, and Utah. Yeah, okay, so that's 4 plus the other 2 at home, because they have 6 games left. Or 6 or 7 games left. Oh, Washington in there. I'm sorry. Yeah. Washington. Throw Washington out, folks. That's not a winner. But anyway, I look at the schedule. Outside of Washington, there isn't an unwinnable game on the schedule, I wouldn't say. But none of them are guarantees either for Oregon State. I think there's a lot of variation with injuries. You never know what happens. You never know who has a bad game. Or even this weekend, you never know what kind of conditions might play into your factor here at Corvallis as well. I would say the Beavers are going to win 3, maybe 4 games. I honestly think they beat both Arizona and Oregon. I think they win those 2 games to finish out the year, and I think they go 3-9, to be honest. I think that's where I'm leaning towards this year. How about you, Brian?
Yeah, so I had this team winning 4 games at the start of the year. I had them winning Idaho State and then 3 conference games.
Gotcha.
Right now I've been wrong on which ones. I had them winning Colorado. I had them winning Arizona.
You had them as Oregon too, right?
Yeah, and Oregon.
So wrong.
So basically, I'm off by a week.
Yeah,
so I don't think it changes a whole lot, because I think Cal is pretty poor defensively.
But I'm gonna give Cal a little bit of credit, because they played really, really well the week before against Utah and held a decent. Okay, I know Utah is not the greatest offensively, but still held them to 23 points. That's nothing to, not smile. I mean, they played well, and I thought their confidence was at maybe even an all-time high in the Sonny Dykes era. I think Oregon State's game plan was just better than Cal's defensive game plan. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, no, I just thought that Oregon State, I think the extra week with that new offensive line is... Yeah, going to be really good, because, man, they're opening some gaping holes.
Do you think Harlow coming back was a game changer for that offensive line? We talked about it a couple weeks ago, and you asked me, what you thought.
I think it's better. Obviously, it's a huge upgrade, a game changer. I don't know. We have to see more.
Right, but I mean, from first glance, though,
we've had one bad game and one good game with him. So,
but we don't know if it was a bad game, because T.J. Wood said that Colorado game up until the point was the best they'd played.
Yeah.
So,
but it still wasn't
loss,
a good game.
Of course.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean,
but there might have been some validity to that statement with how well they played against Cal.
Yeah, there might be, but
yeah,
it's against a Cal defense who's pretty awful. And I'm gonna I'll mention what you said about them going against Utah, but defenses can put together one good game.
That's true.
Like any day, a defense can put together a really good game plan. They can do that. They might have done that against Utah. They didn't do that against Utah State. Or against Oregon State. They showed in their previous however many games, 4 games, that they don't have a good defense. I'm not going to say they had a good defense because they played one good game against Utah.
But I'm not going to say that isn't a great win, because Cal also took down a number 10 Texas team. So,
but what's Texas now?
That's fine, but at the time, a 10th ranked Texas team that beat, granted, the Notre Dame.
Yeah, so we're.
But I'm not saying it's not like Oregon State beat like a Colorado of years past. Cal will probably finish 4th in the North, 4th or 3rd in the North, arguably, and that's not a bad win. If it was against an,
I'm not saying it's a bad win. I'm just saying they have a bad defense, and that you can't dispute that.
Yeah, it's interesting to look at their comparison, but maybe it just shows how anemic Utah's offense could be.
Yeah, and
which is another whole thing.
Like the biggest thing was Oregon State, made them do something that they're not comfortable with. They made them run the ball. They did not let them pass the ball, and Cal had to adjust. It took them a long time for them to start getting offensive yards. And so that's why I think Oregon State's like defensive game plan was great, because they like, all right, we're not going to let you pass. We'll let you pick up yards on the ground.
A lot of yards.
Yeah. So Cal rushed for over 300 yards.
That will never happen again this season, I don't think.
Yeah. So it's a bizarre game.
It is.
Like, it's just bizarre.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I'm sticking with my 4 wins. I don't know where they're going to come for.
Do you think it's unrealistic to think the Beavers could beat both Arizona and Oregon to finish off the season and lose every game in between? I think that's
kind of what I've had.
I think that's a realistic expectation. I really do.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's why I'm saying like, it's still 4 wins.
Yeah.
It might not be Oregon and Arizona now, but it could be Stanford or Washington State. But I'm just still sticking with that 4 wins. I don't think that this is a more than a 5-win team.
Real quick question for you, Brian. If Oregon State were to somehow beat Utah, how much would that change? Do you think would you start to think that maybe this team clicked, or do you still not get too ahead of yourself?
It's definitely something you have to wait and see, because there's like, when you just look at like one game isolation, anyone can be great. I mean, Oregon State was great against Oregon last year in the Civil War, but that doesn't mean that they were a good team. But
if Oregon State was able to string together back-to-back wins, that'd be the first time since I believe 2014, when they beat both Portland State and Hawaii. Actually, I think I think that'd be something where you need to look at, because this Utah team is 21st overall, which obviously it's gonna be a tremendous challenge for the Beavers. But it'll be interesting to see, Brian, what confidence does for this team. But then Coach Anderson said, I also kind of got to bring them back to earth a little bit and realize they beat a Cal team, but but look, the animal you have coming in now is the number 21st Utah team that's been in and out of all over the polls the last year. I mean, last year, Brian, they were as high as number 3 at one point. I mean, this Utah team, they got a lot of talent. Yeah,
and that to answer your question, like, yeah, it would change some things. I would reassess some things. Like, all right, they took away one team's what their dangers at. They're averaging over 430 yards passing yards a game, held them to under 150,
and that's impressive.
That is impressive. They're able to execute their game plan. They're able to run the ball when Cal knew that they were going to run the ball.
However, though, I do have to say, giving Cal credit, Cal scores a lot of points, and they still found a way to put points on the board without Davis Webb, and that's what good offenses do. So Cal's offense, they're still a good offense.
Yeah.
It's their defense that needs a little bit of work.
But I talked to Baker Pritchard today.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, and he was like, that was the game plan. We were gonna force them to run. Like, we weren't gonna let them pass the ball. We weren't gonna do any of that. We were gonna take away their biggest strength and make them beat us with the run. And gosh darn it, Cal almost did it.
They did. When Khalfani Muhammad, I mean, he was quick. And when obviously, it was interesting. Cal elected to use more of their speed back in Muhammad rather than kind of their real power back in Vic and Wary, who is a great back. Vic and Wary was in that same, ESPN top 10 running backs with like the Royce Freeman, and that Dalvin Cook class and that Leonard Fournette. Like, he was in like that top 10. So great, really good running back out of there. And, he didn't even get utilized. They used Muhammad because Muhammad was just able to find those holes. He ran very well.
Yeah, no, he really did. I think he had over like 150 yards and whatnot.
And then Trey Watson did great as well.
Yeah. And so, yeah, if Oregon State can go head to head with Utah and like either one, have it like really close, have it a game that comes down to the end, right, or can get a win, yeah, I'll definitely have to reassess, right, because
gotcha.
They've shown, twice in a row that they can put together game plans that they can execute and they can make enough plays to win, because that's something that they haven't done since last year. They haven't put together consecutive games. So that's where I stand on that. All right, final question about the Cal-Colorado game before we get into not Cal-Colorado, Oregon State, before we get into Utah. Who are you giving the game ball to?
Game ball for me is going to Treston Decoud.
Treston Decoud?
I mean, you think about it, or Cal tried to go to Chad Hansen early. I think he had 4 or 5 targets within the first quarter or so because they were trying to throw the ball. Deku did a great job. He got a face mask penalty, and I think he got a PI, but that was about it for the game. He played so well on Chad Hansen. There were times his great technique forced, not forced him because that would have been a penalty, but kind of maneuvered Hansen where he had to step out of bounds on his own way. He played a great game, and really, you take away their number one receiver, and I thought, I was wrong. I thought, Brian, we talked last week that we thought maybe Deku would shut him down, but then Cal's fourth unknown receiver would get, hundreds of yards. But Deku played well, and I'm going to give him my game ball. But actually, a decent performance by the whole secondary. I was really impressed by Kendall Hill as well, playing, back end, converted wide receiver now, played everywhere, 2 ACL tears, you name it. The odds have been stacked against him. He played well, but my game ball is definitely a trust in Deku.
That's an excellent point. That's an excellent pick, and I can't disagree even a little bit on that one because Deku had himself a hell of a game. But I'm going to go with my man, Ryan Nall.
Ooh. Yeah, I stuck defense, but yeah.
Yeah, I just thought that, he had 200-plus yards, career high.
Yeah, like 10 yards a carry. In the words of Daryl Garrettson, that's stuff I do on Madden, man.
Yeah, that was, I think it was 16 yards a carry.
Oh, was it? Oh, my bad.
And Ryan Nall just became this fictional superhero.
The Wrecking Nall, man.
Yeah.
The Wrecking Nall returns.
No, yeah, that was probably that he was just a lot of fun to watch that game because he was just
he really people were tweeting during the game that the dude looked like Toby Gerhardt at Stanford.
Yeah.
When he was just dragging guys along, and it really did. It actually reminded me of a really, really big built running back like that just drags guys. And I said, you look at how successful Toby Gerhardt was for Stanford. I'm not saying Ryan Nall's Toby Gerhardt, but Ryan Nall's still a young guy, only a sophomore. And Toby Gerhardt's senior year, he was one of the 5 invited to the Heisman contention. Granted, I don't I'm saying I know that's an unfair comparison, of course, but Ryan Nall, he looked really, really good, and people were comparing him to Steven Jackson, dragging guys, and I don't think Oregon State's had that physical of a running back since Evanson Bernard. Just guys that were just wanted to run you over. Ja'Course Rogers, great running back, but I'm not sure he's a guy that necessarily wanted to just run through you.
Ask John Boyette.
There were moments, yes,
yeah.
But I think in terms of pure physicality,
was Evanson Bernard even a power back? I thought he was just a little shifty guy.
I remember Bernard just running over guys a few times, but if you wanted to go true comparison, Steven Jackson is a fair comparison.
No, yeah,
where just a guy where you're he's got kind of quicker than expected speed. Ryan Nall, when he got converted to running back, nobody really knew how fast he was. And except for maybe the coaching staff, they didn't know he kind of had an extra gear. I didn't know he had that extra gear until he outran Oregon secondary last year.
Yeah, I watched Ryan Nall in the state semifinals his senior year, and he had I think 3 touchdown runs of 70+ yards.
Jeez,
and I was like, huh,
where are we gonna put this guy at tight end?
Well, he
was supposed to come in as a tight end, I believe, in Riley, or fullback or tight end in Riley's system. I believe that's what I don't think he was.
It's a mystery what he was recruited as because, going into, last year's Civil War, he was going to switch to linebacker. But then he had a great Civil War. Then maybe we'll put him at running back. He's the great enigma for Oregon State sports, just this local folk hero that just can play so many different positions. Is he an offensive player? Is he a defensive player? But man, he just really kind of took over that game. And it's no surprise that, once he went down with his injury, because right now he's, during practice, he's wearing the boot. It's the offense stuttered.
Yep.
And Cal made its comeback. That's how it went. He took him out and Cal made their comeback.
Yeah. Well, just real quick, just for sake of this, Rivals.com has Ryan Nall as a 3-star tight end that only received offers from Oregon State, Colorado, and Portland State.
Yeah, no, he was very, very lightly recruited.
So, if that ends up being accurate, a tight end, 3 stars, 6'3", 230, committed to Oregon State. I mean, other offers really weren't that appealing.
Yeah.
So Oregon State may have found one of their diamonds in the rough, Brian.
Absolutely. Yeah, he was incredible.
I mean, we can have a whole podcast on Ryan Hall, but I mean, yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, Oregon State, first Pac-12 win under Gary Anderson. Big moment.
It was a special moment. It was one of the more fun games I ever got to cover at Oregon State.
Yeah, it was.
I mean, I'm not saying that as journalists, and of course, you even if you love to have those competitive moments. I mean, I can remember some of the worser moments I've ever had covering a game. Obviously the loss to Washington, where it was like 35-3, is right up there. UCLA's 41-0 win last year is right up there. I mean, you love competitive moments. Every person does that even covers a game. They love competitive moments, and for us, for me personally, even being just an Oregon State student as well, it was an exciting moment.
Yeah, no, it really was, and your call definitely highlighted your excitement.
As Josh Warden said, there was no more person excited than Brenden Slaughter, but might have to rein it in. But that might be my only Pac-12 win of the year, Brian. So you never know. You kind of got to save those moments.
Yeah, Josh's assessment was very accurate. So anyway,
suppose so.
Looking ahead to Saturday, was it a 1 o'clock kickoff?
1 o'clock. And actually, Brian, well, I'll let you talk about it real quick while I pull up the weather report.
Oh, the weather report. Yeah, it is going to be a little drizzly, and it might be a little wet.
Okay, so real quick here, we're just gonna check out what the weather report is looking like for Saturday. And for any of you fans that are coming down to Corvallis, I might recommend investing in some seats that are under cover at Research Stadium. So let's look at Saturday here. Saturday we got rain all day, an inch of rain, and expected to be, I believe, let's see if I can find this here, 30 to 40 mile an hour winds guaranteed with gusts up to 50. That's a wet day. Let's see where we at. And Brian, the peak of the rain is at 1 o'clock, but actually we have a 90% chance of rain at 1 o'clock, but we dip down to a 70% chance at 2 o'clock. Ooh, maybe only an hour for rain.
And there you have it. Meteorologist Brenden Slaughter with the weather report on the Brian and Brenden Talking About Beaver Football podcast.
Back to you, Brian.
Yeah, no, so weather definitely going to be an issue. Heavy rain. Looks like wind's going to be something. It's going to be a mess throwing the ball. So with that being said, who has the advantage?
Well, here's the thing. Utah and Colorado, it doesn't rain much. Any kind of precipitation they usually get over there is snow. And I've seen both instances of Oregon State using elements to their advantage and not using them. The biggest not using, I don't know if you remember the UCLA game last year, but it was a downpour. And I thought, wow, okay, UCLA doesn't usually play in the rain too much. UCLA beat Oregon State 41-0. It was wet, though. It was really wet. And then I also remember in 2014, it was about 20 degrees, and it affected Arizona State when Oregon State pulled off that upset. I guarantee you it affected them. Mike Riley said after the game, yeah, we knew we had an advantage. And Arizona State Todd Graham said, our guys weren't mentally prepared to play in something that cold. Utah, I know they played in the cold, but, it's like, the state of Colorado gets, 340 days of sunshine a year. Utah's right around the same thing. They get, 300 and some days of sunshine a year because you don't get a whole lot of precipitation over there. And if it is, it's snow, and then it clears up quick, and it's rain because you're in the kind of that high desert kind of area. So with that being said, Oregon State, I think, will have the advantage playing in the pouring down rain. But Utah has a nice counterpunch because what Oregon State does well is run the ball, and we know Utah's going to stack the box and force Darryl Garrettson to make throws deep or even intermediate throws that Bryant arguably this week in practice and even weeks before, Garrettson hasn't proven he can make.
Yep, that's a good point. It's almost like you're taking a geography class or a geology class.
Hey, Brenden the meteorologist over here.
Yeah, no.
Should I change my career path now?
Obviously.
All right, goodbye, guys. Brenden the sportscaster is done.
Okay, so my take on this is that I think it's a great equalizer for both. I don't know if one team has the advantage or not because I mean, the teams, they don't practice in the rain.
Oh, actually, you know what's actually kind of interesting? Now that I've thought about it, it'd be really interesting to see if Coach Anderson puts his guys in the rain tomorrow to get rid. Because I was talking to you before the podcast. I'm like, oh, it'd be so nice to be inside tomorrow for practice business, but tomorrow's like the first day of it starting to just pour for like the next,
year.
Yeah, Brian Rathbone hit it right on the spot, folks. But I wonder, because Treston Deku told me today, he goes, oh yeah, we know it's going to be wet. We know. And I'm like, huh. I wonder if he'd put his guys out there in the rain. That honestly, if I was Coach Anderson, it'd be something I'd consider because it might prepare my guys a little bit.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. That they should practice outdoors at least for a little bit.
Yeah,
especially during the rain because it's a different game.
Harder to throw a football and
it's harder to catch.
It might be interesting to see. Daryl Garrettson actually might be interesting to see if he wears that glove again, Brian.
No, that offensive lineman glove.
Maybe he'll wear 2 offensive lineman gloves just so he can hang on to the football. But those wide receivers are going to want to make sure those gloves got max grip on them.
Yeah, and then the tricky thing with those wide receiver gloves is keeping them dry.
Yep.
Because once they get wet, those are they're pointless. They're useless. They're slick. They
almost make it worse in your hands.
Exactly.
So I'm sure Oregon State will make sure they have plenty of those Nike Vapor Pros. Probably some extra pairs on the sideline. Maybe throw them under a heater a little bit too.
Yeah, and also to add a little bit more. I mean, Daryl Garrett's like you talked about being difficult to throw, and I mean Daryl's from Arizona. Yeah, it doesn't rain off in there.
Well, and the only place he played college ball was Utah State, where it ties right into what I was telling you. It doesn't rain a whole lot in Utah, and yeah.
So I think this game is going to come down to like really who runs the ball better, who runs the ball better, who's going to be able. Because I mean, Utah ran a lot against Cal. They ran for a lot of yards. Oregon State obviously ran for a lot of yards against Cal. So it's going to come down to who can control the line of scrimmage, who can pick up those chunk yards on the ground, who can secure the ball, because fumbles are also going to be a huge liability for the defense. Ball security is going to be huge. So it just kind of comes down to those two things.
Yeah, and actually, Brian, to bring it up, you mentioned it, and obviously I think it's interesting because I also think there's an equalizer because Utah is dangerously thin at running back. They just lost their leading rusher for the season to an ACL tear. One of their other running backs is out with an undisclosed injury. Kyle Whittingham said this is the lowest depth he's ever had at Utah, ever, and that he can ever remember at Utah. And he said we're one injury away from putting a walk-on in at running back. That'd be like Oregon State putting in like a Jalen Bailey at running back, I think, or like I'm trying to remember who else they have on the running back squad that's like a walk-on practice guy. But
Yancey.
Yeah, Kieran Yancey. That would be what the equivalent of it is. And real quick, just for
Yancey can do it, man. He's got a little Jaquiz Rogers in him.
And just for comparison's sake, Brian, and just to prove you that I was right, the state of Utah has 12.2 inches of rain per year. That ranks them 49th in the U.S. in total rain. They don't get rained on very much. Sorry, I had to pull that up just because.
All right.
Wow, only behind Nevada. But anyway.
Yeah. So anyway, I think it's going to be who can establish a run game, because I mean Daryl Garrettson still hasn't thrown had a passing touchdown since the third quarter at Minnesota.
Yeah, that's a factor. And then I don't want to stir the pot, and there is no pot to stir. But there is a case to be said and a reason to be said, and I said this today. Daryl Garrettson today in practice, Brian, missed on back-to-back deep throws. Connor Blount comes in, makes 2 deep throws. I'm not trying to create a controversy, but it's I from what I saw today, and I think it's a chemistry thing. It's getting back on timing, but I can say right now the job is still Garrettson's. I'm not trying to cause any controversy, but I could argue Connor Blount has better touch on deep ball.
I haven't seen enough from Connor Blount. I've seen enough from Garrettson.
I haven't seen him connect on a deep ball with a consistent basis. Yeah, and I'm not trying
which is weird because man, during the summer he was slinging that thing. Maybe,
was he?
Maybe the cold weather is really affecting him being an Arizona boy and coming from the state that is ranked 49th in total rainfall. Goodness gracious!
That Idaho State game was wet. I mean, Boise State, I don't know. And then Colorado.
Yeah.
Anyway, but I'll just go find a trend on Daryl Garrison and rain, Brian. Just come back to you with a great story.
Yeah, because, like one of the things that really impressed me during summer was just his ability to connect on the deep ball. And we haven't seen that in the game. And so that's kind of the puzzling things, from him.
Maybe you got to go ask him, Brian. Be like, are you a city boy? Do you enjoy the nice weather?
I'm sure he does.
But, I mean.
Who doesn't enjoy the nice weather?
That's true. I'd say, can you not throw the? I mean, it's crazy to think though that it is, but good quarterbacks, they find a way to do it anyway. I mean, look at Josh Rosen. Last year when was a true freshman and granted he's a good quarterback, but came into Research Stadium and made all the throws in the rain that he needed to make. Made a couple. I think he threw like one interception, but still led his team. Good quarterbacks, they find a way to get through their weakness and find a way to get through good teams. So Garrison, I'm sure he'll get it together.
But that Oregon State defense last year made a lot
of
quarterbacks look good.
That's true. I mean, that's true. That's a fair point. So I guess we gotta get into predictions for Oregon State Utah.
Just like I have one more question.
No, please.
You know what? Actually, we kind of already talked about it. I was gonna say was the carryover from Cal. How big of a are they gonna be able to shut down Utah's strength on offense the way that they did Cal's?
Well, there's no doubt in my mind that Cal's better offense. That's not even comparable in my opinion. And I mean, I think it's a different task. Tristan Day-Cood mentioned to me today. He said we know they're going to emphasize the run game because when it's wet, it's raining, it's a lot harder for receivers to go run double. He said they like to run a lot of double moves on the outside and try to shimmy and shake. And he said when it pours down rain, there's slippage, there's hard, if a quarterback just throws a ball on like a timing route, that receiver slips, that's a pick, it's everything else. So I think Oregon State has got to prepare to stop the run this week, almost the exact opposite of what they had to do this last week, which is a tough task. But I mean, I think Oregon State, if they play with the same kind of tenacity they played with last week, I think they'll have a good chance.
Yeah, I'm still a little worried about if they will be able to stop the run game because that's obviously Utah's strength.
But Utah doesn't have the depth in there. At running back, that's the thing that I think is an advantage for Oregon State. Is Utah being on like their fourth string running back. I can see you go 4 deep at Oregon State. Who do you have? I mean, obviously Utah's a little bit better, but I mean, I'm thinking if we had to replace Ryan Nall with like a Jalen Bailey, there'd be a massive drop off.
There would, but I mean, I don't know a lot about who this Utah running back is. I mean, he could be someone good. He could be just a guy that's just like waiting for his time.
Maybe. I mean, I don't know. It's hard to say.
I mean, Ryan Nall was like a third string running back last year.
That's true. Well, I mean, it'd be interesting to see.
Yeah. And so I'm worried about the defensive line getting overpowered by Utah's offensive line. I know Utah's missing their center and they're bringing in a new one, but that's still a really good offensive line with a ton of experience. And I don't know, Oregon State hasn't shown that they can stop a run game, really, other than Idaho State. So that's where I'm weary is that, I mean, I had the same doubts going into last week. I didn't think that they'd be able to stop the passing game. Oh, look, they did. So I still have the same questions, but I think the running game is a little more, I don't know. I don't even know where I'm going with this. I just question if they'll be able to stop the running game.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Brian. And that's going to tie right into my prediction. But I think I kind of covered what I was going to say, and I think Oregon State they're going to have a tough task. Period. And I think we'll learn a lot about this team this weekend.
All right, score predictions. Who are you taking?
I'm taking Utah, but it's going to be another close game. I think it's going to be close. It's going to be very low scoring. I got Utah winning 17-14. There's going to be a lot of ground games, and I think the over-under on turnovers, I want to say 6, 3 on each side. It's going to be wet. That ball is going to move a lot. I think 6 turnovers, maybe even a touch more than that. But I got 17-14 Utah.
I have Utah winning as well, but 24-16.
So still low scoring.
Still low scoring, yeah. I mean, Utah's not a high-octane offense or by any stretch. And last year, I mean, Oregon State went into Salt Lake City and with Nick Mitchell's quarterback and played pretty tough.
And I think more than anything, Brian, this game is, like I talked to Coach Chad today, and sorry, I say Coach Chad because I think I'd probably mispronounce his last name. But this game, we haven't made enough. I think I would have, I could probably do a whole podcast on it, on the emotions this game brings. Gary Anderson is probably closer with Kyle Whittingham than anybody. Him and Kyle Whittingham, they're friends. He said they text every week. I mean, they're really good friends. He was there. I mean, you go back. Gary Anderson was a defensive coordinator when Utah went, 13-0 in, I think, 2008. Was that 2008? Either way, Gary Anderson was the defensive line coach when Urban Meyer came in there with Alex Smith way back in the day. I mean, Coach Chad was on that staff. Kalani Sitake was on that staff last year. Liza Tuyaki last year. The connections run really deep. I think Coach Clune was on that staff for a little period of time, if I remember correctly. Maybe not. I'm trying to remember who was all there, because Anderson brought a lot of guys with him. But either way, I'm 50-50 on Clune. But, it's an emotional game for the coaches. Gary Anderson knows Utah probably better than any other program, and I think that's why they played so well in Salt Lake last year.
Yeah. So, I have 24-16. I have OSU scoring late. So I think Utah kind of controls the game. So next up on the docket, USC Arizona. You know what we should do real quick? Before we do any of that, we should go over what we did right and what we did wrong from last week.
Sure.
So quick pause on the predictions, and we'll recap how we did. So first, the OSU Cal game.
Both of us were obviously wrong.
Both of us were wrong. Brenden gets a little extra points because it was a closer game than I had a blowout. I had a 24-point loss. Brenden had a 3-point loss, and OSU coincidentally won by 3.
Yeah, I'd be lying to you if I told you Oregon State was going to win that game, Brian. I didn't think they were going to win that game.
Yep, and then USC Colorado.
I had Colorado.
Yeah, you had Colorado winning pretty big. And I
picked the Trojans.
I picked the Trojans and was not really close in the score. Next up, we both picked the Washington-Oregon game right.
Yep.
It was gosh. We'll talk more about Oregon, but they're off this week.
Yeah, we can talk about the Ducks. The Ducks, they're bleeding. They're just bleeding.
Yeah, it's getting ugly in Eugene.
Yep.
Yeah, 70-21 loss. It wasn't even competitive.
No, and the thing is, Washington Bryan had 70 with 10 minutes to go. They probably could have hung if they kept their starter. It would have been interesting to see how many points they could have hung on them.
Yeah, they.
Yeah.
Just dominated.
Anyway.
Arizona, Utah. We both picked right. We both picked Utah. It was a good week. And then we get to the ASU UCLA game. I picked UCLA to win by 9, by 11. You picked Arizona State by 11. Arizona State won by 3.
Okay, cool. Win for and then I believe
Washington State, Stanford. Gosh, Stanford.
Brian picked Stanford. I picked the Cougs, man. Brenden, I beat you again in week-to-week matchup, Brian.
It's all luck.
I mean, like I said, Stanford is a wounded animal right now.
Yeah, you were actually really close to score. You picked 42-21. It was 42-16.
Brenden, do we want to just go to Vegas, Brian? We can just go to Vegas and Brenden, and we can make a living. No, I
don't think you're old enough.
That's 7 April. Yeah, still a few months away. But anyway, it's interesting because I'm still baffled about Stanford, but I knew the Cougars were going to win. Stanford's defense is not what it was.
Yeah, that's becoming very obvious. All right, so it was actually a pretty good week for both of us. We picked most of them right, except for the OSU game.
Yeah.
And then you picked the Arizona State and Stanford and Washington State game right. I got those wrong, and I got the USC game right, and you got that one wrong. So it's an overall really good week. Back to the picks.
All right.
So where we left off, USC, Arizona.
Yeah, I have the Trojans. Arizona's a bad football team. They don't really have an identity on offense right now, which is scary considering who their coach is. I mean, Rich Rodriguez is an offensive guy, arguably one of the creators of the up-tempo spread, or one of the guys that really brought it to fruition. And they look bad. I got SC, and I got them winning 31-14.
Yeah, I don't know what's up with Arizona. Nick Wilson has been. Well, he's been injured. That's probably a big reason.
Another guy in that star-studded class with Royce Freeman and Leonard Fournette and Vic and was absolute dynamite last year when he was healthy, but has not been healthy.
Yeah, so I think he's getting back closer to health this week, so that could change some things, but I'm like you. I'm taking USC 35-17.
Cool.
All right, a non-conference game. We got Stanford at Notre Dame, two teams that were
absolutely disappointed this year.
Yeah, two preseason top 10 teams, both played in BCS games a year ago, or what would be BCS games. Stanford was in the Rose Bowl. Notre Dame was in the Fiesta Bowl. Both have losing records. Who you got?
I got the Irish, and here's why. I got the Irish because I think this game, Brian, I think that... why am I drawing a blank? Brian Kelly, right?
Yep, Brian Kelly.
I don't know why I was drawing a blank. I think Brian Kelly's coaching for his job. I really do. I think this is absolutely... Notre Dame last week, Brian, getting beat by NC State, them playing in Hurricane Matthew practically, and losing. I think they lost 10-7. I think. I'm gonna actually look at that real quick because it was an absolute. Yeah, no, they lost 10-3, Brian.
Yeah,
and I think that Brian Kelly is indeed coaching for his job, and I think that Brian Kelly behind a Notre Dame crowd, I think they get this win. I think they get it 24-14 because Stanford, I don't think has an offense right now, and if Christian McCaffrey is not, and I'm not sure, he's questionable. I don't think he's going to play this week from what I've heard, and without McCaffrey, that offense has got absolutely nothing going for him right now.
Yeah, no, I have a very similar score. I have Notre Dame winning as well.
Put Stanford at 3-3. Wow.
Yeah, so I'm going to go Notre Dame. I just think that it's at home.
Yeah. These games I
don't think Notre Dame's quite. They've had some really close losses. I mean, they had to play a monsoon basically last week.
Yeah,
I'm going 31-17.
That was a game that arguably, Brian, should have been canceled or postponed. That's almost unplayable football conditions. I mean, that'll make the conditions this Saturday at Research Stadium look like a sunny 80-degree day.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you watched any of that game.
Oh, I watched.
And I woke up and I woke up that Saturday because we had some time before the game, and I turned on the TV and I'm like, is that a monsoon? You could just see puddles of water piled on turf. That does not happen. Water does not just, pool up on turf that has, the rubber bits in it unless there's a lot of water in that turf.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Yep. So, Notre Dame, 31-17. I don't know what to say about Stanford anymore. I think they just...
Brian, you picked against them back-to-back weeks wrong, and you're just like, all right, I'm done.
Yeah, I'm done.
Brian's done with Stanford.
All right, final game of the week.
Two more.
Two more. Do we skip one?
We have Arizona State, Colorado.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Arizona State, Colorado. Two teams that are either good or bad.
Colorado's going to win. Arizona State, they are overranked. They are so overranked. I'm sorry. I mean, Arizona State, for me, in my opinion, they had no business beating UCLA last week. They arguably got really lucky beating Cal. I'm not impressed by Northern Arizona or UTSA. They basically just outscored Texas Tech. Their defense their defense is bad. I mean, even in their best performance, they've allowed 20. In their worst, they allowed 55 points. Colorado's back at home. I got the Buffaloes winning 42-21. I think Colorado responds in a big way after that USC game.
Yeah, response is definitely a buzzword that I would use for Colorado because, I mean, they were riding high. After those two games against Oregon and Oregon State, they were... Yeah,
but even for me, that's that USC loss, it's a loss you shouldn't have had, but it's still nothing to... I mean, I thought...
It's not something to point your fingers at or, stick your nose up at, but... Yeah. How are they going to handle
you're right.
When they come crashing back to earth, it's going to be tough to get back to where they were.
And you called it, Brian. You said that you didn't think they knew how to handle success, and you called it right that game last week. This game is in Boulder. I think that's an effect for that's obviously Boulder is a home field advantage. Mm-hmm. Only one in the pack where you're a mile above sea level, and even some Oregon State players said it was on their minds. So I got Arizona State coming in, and I think Colorado's a 14-point favorite almost, and I think that it's that and more, obviously.
Yep, I have them winning by 14. I have Colorado winning. I have them winning 49-35, but that'll be a game that I'll watch pretty closely because I can see There might be a little bit of a quarterback controversy developing in Boulder.
Cepho and Steven Montez.
Yeah, that we might have a 2012 Cody Vaz, Sean Mannion type
That's
thing.
exactly what it looks like to me, except Cepho Lufo is not coming back next year, so if it creates more controversy because you could go with Montez and be set for the next 3 years.
You said 42-21?
Yes. And the interesting thing now is, and obviously Brian will actually be, I think we'll be home by then based on the Utah game. Be able to catch that game.
Nice.
So our kickoff will, we should be back by then. So that'd be good.
All right, the final game in this underwhelming week of Pac-12 games, UCLA, Washington State.
The spread is even on this game.
I'm shocked by that.
Yeah, spread is honestly even. And matchup predictor says the Cougs. I'm having a hard time going against the Cougs at home. Cougs at home, UCLA has been inconsistent this year. They're 1-2. They don't really impress me. Their defense is a little bit better, but they haven't played anyone like Luke Falk, and I think Washington State's a solid team. And I got the Cougars, I believe. I got them 45-21. Or maybe 45-28, I'm sorry. 45-28. UCLA put some points up, but I got the Cougs winning by, I got them winning by 14. They're a good team. I really like the Cougs, and the Cougs are doing what I thought they'd do, Brian. Lose to a Division II team again, and then or FCS team, and then maybe rattle off 8-9 wins.
Yeah, no, I could very well see that happening. I think
that's just the Cougs, man.
Classic. Yeah, no, what's interesting, we had almost the exact same point spread. I have Washington State winning 42-24. Yeah, I think, especially with Josh Rosen being injured last week and his health kind of up in the air. And
he got injured. I did not know that.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm assuming because, there's a quarterback that came in and threw like 11 passes.
Oh, really? I totally didn't even see that. Well, if that's the case, one thing also, Brian, that I think is worth noting about the Cougs, you look at their, not to get too far off topic, but the Cougars' losses, one of them to Boise State, who's number 15. That's a very solid loss, and it was on the road.
Yeah.
The other one to Eastern Washington. Eastern Washington's number 3 in the FCS poll. And the number 1 team in the FCS poll, Notre Dame, North Dakota State, is like 27th in receiving votes. Like, it's arguably, if they keep winning, they might crack the top 25 for an FCS team, which I don't know if that's ever been done.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy.
So, that's why I mean that gap between some of those top teams and whatnot. So, arguably, I'm not going to say Washington State, there's sometimes that FCS loss isn't, as bad as it used to be maybe 5-6 years ago.
Yeah, when Oregon State lost to Eastern Washington, they still went on to win 7 games.
Well, yeah, and that Eastern Washington team only won like 6-7 games. This Eastern Washington... they weren't in the title that year, were they?
They went pretty far in the playoffs. Yeah, that was with Vernon Adams, man.
Oh, that's right. I was thinking Sac State.
Yeah, Sac State wasn't a good
when
team.
They went like 3-9 in the FCS that year.
Yeah. No, Sac State was a bad team.
That's right. I'm sorry. That's right. That was a Vernon Adams team. My apologies. But no, this Eastern Washington team now is number 3, and they've just been winning game after game. So, it's, that gap is closing, but obviously that Sac State loss when they went 3-9. But that's why I said, I think you and I talked about it, and we said when the Cougars lost that, they'd probably do the typical Coug thing, Brian, then, win 8 games and be like, wow, the Cougars could have really went like, 11-1 or 10-2, but they lost to a Division I team or Division FCS team.
Yeah, I did the same thing last year.
So crazy. State. But yeah, I got the Cougs. Brian, how about you?
I have 42-24 Cougs.
There you go.
They have some balance now. They have a little bit of a run game going.
Jamal Morrow.
It's
43 carries on the year.
Yeah, 43.
Even 3 touchdowns, Brian, all against the Ducks.
All against the Ducks, yeah. So they can beat you in multiple ways now.
That Leach offense.
Yeah, no, I like the Cougs. I like Luke Falk. I think he's really, really good. So that's who I'm going with the Cougs.
Yeah, I think it's solid, and I think it's going to be an interesting week. And obviously, this is a week where a couple teams are on bye weeks, and like we mentioned, the Wounded Ducks get a chance to get ready for a game against Cal. That game is going to really tell me a lot about both teams.
Yeah,
it's a Friday game next week. The Friday game the night before we actually get to travel to Washington. I'll have to keep some tabs on that game, Brian.
Yeah, it's really too bad that Oregon's on a bye this week because it would just be so great to talk about that loss even more. And
that's the thing is I look at it and someone asked me the other day, Brian, they go, well, do you think the Ducks are going to beat, and someone's like, oh yeah, the Ducks are going to beat Cal. And I say, I would be willing to bet my money that Davis Webb doesn't have a performance like that again this year. And with Cal having a week and a half to fix what they did wrong against Oregon State, and with how bad Oregon's defense is, I would not be shocked to see Cal run away with that game.
And that game's in Berkeley.
Yep. So obviously that's next week's pick'em. I'm excited for it already, but dang, Brian, usually a Beaver win coupled with a Duck loss is just a great time.
It was great last weekend, that's for sure.
So anyway, with that being said.
So yeah, you can look forward to the call from Josh Ward and Brendan Slaughter on 88.7 KBVR Corvallis.
Pre-game at 12:30. We'll be there. We even have Brian Rathbone at halftime for the KBVR trivia question. Brian, you and I have had some pretty competitive matches up the last couple weeks.
Yep, I think the last 2 weeks, because I won the week before, and then we tied.
And then we tied. So Brian's got a 1-0-1 lead on me right now.
Yeah, it's pretty great. So yeah, we'll continue to have more coverage of Oregon State, in the coming weeks, or post game and all that. So look out for all that coverage. Thank you all again to all of our listeners who continue to watch, or I guess listen, week after week. We love doing these things, so if you guys keep listening, we'll keep doing them. And even if you don't, we'll still probably do them.
Yep.
So yeah, that's it. That's a cap on, or a lid on the 7th episode of the Brian and Brendan Talking About Beaver Football podcast. Thanks again, everyone, for listening. Have a nice day.
Soak the ropes with your holy